Summerlin from Chicago, Illinois. Just wanted to give a huge shout out to the Relay for all the love and support they've given my team and I. And make sure you stay tuned for all the latest boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Amanda Serrano posted this via her Instagram account. It reads, #EasyWork. Fight camp is in full force. We have a December fight date. We can't talk the exact day or opponent because the promoting company has to put out their press release, but we promise it will be a good one for women's boxing. Emphasis on women's boxing. Stay tuned for more on this. #Fight Squad. Legends live forever. And this comes as a bit of a surprise to me because the last time we heard anything regarding Amanda Serrano, it involved the octagon. It involved fighting in the cage, not the squared circle, but there appears to be a change in plans. It seems that Amanda Serrano is set to be boxing in a boxing match sometime in December. Against who? We don't know yet. This is a very interesting bit of news because one is left to wonder what promotional outfit is Amanda Serrano going to be working with moving forward for her boxing matches. Has that relationship with Lou DiBella ended? Because there were rumors that that relationship was set to expire in the near future. Are we there now? Are we there yet? I don't really know. You kind of get the impression that whoever Amanda's talking about, whoever it is they're going to be working with, it might be someone new, because if it were Lou DiBella, they wouldn't be as clandestine with this news as they're being. Is it possible that Team Serrano have joined forces with some other promoter? At this point, I really don't know. Though I do maintain my original position that it is still quite possible that Amanda Serrano retires from the sport of boxing in the near future, depending on how things go. If things stay immaterial, if she can't secure the kind of purse amounts, the kind of dollar amounts that she's looking for. I still look at that as a legitimate possibility. And that's only because that's what Amanda was going to do up until the point she signed that 3-fight deal with Matchroom. That's what the plan was, to retire from the sport of boxing and focus on mixed martial arts. And very recently, Amanda did hint at making an appearance in the cage, not the squared circle. So I stand by my original assertion that depending on how things go for Amanda in the sport of boxing, at this point, she might so decide to walk away from it. It all depends. It all depends on what fights are made available to her and how much money she stands to make from those fights. In truth, I'm not against Amanda Serrano sticking around, so long as she fights in the kind of fights that we want to see her fight in, i.e. unification matches. If she can get a fight with the IBF featherweight champion, Sarah Mahfoud, if she can get a fight with the unified featherweight champion, Jelena Marjanovic, I'm all for it. I understand that a lot of people out there feel raw about how the situation with Katie Taylor went, but the past is the past. Moving forward, if Amanda Serrano can somehow finagle a situation to where she unifies the titles at 126, I'm not against it. I'm all for it, as 126 is a division that is fast heating up. Champions like Jelena Marjanovic, champions like Sarah Mahfoud, up-and-comers like Ellie Scottney, Lara Grizab. There's plenty of good fights to make. There is still a small chance that Amanda Serrano could be a part of one of those fights with one of those fighters. I think about what Amanda Serrano has done in her career, what she has accomplished, that she's a 7-division champion, having been a champion in 7 different weight classes. And for a fighter at this stage in their career, the only thing left to do is unified titles, is shoot for undisputed, because outside of that, I don't know what she'd be sticking around for. So hypothetically speaking, what if Amanda Serrano's business partnership with DiBella Entertainment has ended and she's in cahoots with someone else, someone who could perhaps get her the kind of unification matches that she hasn't had thus far? You know, I think about Dimitri Salita of Salita Promotions. Clarissa Shields is promoter. And, you know, for what it's worth, he might not have a big stable of fighters like a Top-Rank, Matchroom, or a Premier Boxing Champions. Perhaps not. But what he's done with Clarissa, the situations that he's orchestrated for her... He's done good. Those are the kinds of situations I'd like to see Amanda Serrano in. That's just a suggestion. and this is all purely speculation after all, that if the business partnership between Team Serrano and Lou DiBella has ended, Dimitri Salita might be a good fit for her. I mean, Clarissa Shields, she does have a home for her fights on Showtime.
That's where she's been fighting.
For the most part. I mean, just imagine if you could get Amanda Serrano in a unification fight on the same card as Clarissa Shields. It's really not a bad idea. Could be a fruitful relationship, though I reiterate, that is purely speculation. Here and now, we don't know what the situation is. We'll find out what's what in December, when Amanda Serrano is set to be making her next ring appearance. And other news, per tweet from Jonathan Lear, sources confirm Michael Conlan will face Isaac Dogboe on December 5th at the Albert Hall in London on the Tyson Fury undercard. The fight will be at 122 pounds. It appears that Ireland's own Mick Conlan is going to be making a move downstairs to the super bantamweight division. The super bantamweight division where he debuted as a professional, though he's spent a good amount of his professional career as a featherweight in the featherweight division. For this fight, he's gone back down to 122. Something very similar is true for the former WBO super bantamweight champion, Isaac Dogboe. You know, he has since rebounded from those two losses to El Vaquero Emmanuel Navarrete. Isaac is coming off an 8th-round TKO stoppage of Chris Avalos. That fight took place at the featherweight limit. It appears that Isaac, like Mick, is going to be making a move back downstairs to 122 for this fight. What do I think of this? What do I think of this news? I like the fight. It's a good step up in competition for Mick, undefeated Mick Conlan, who sports a professional record of 14 wins and no losses. It's a good fight. I like the fight, though I do question why is Mick Conlan all of a sudden deciding to go back down to 122 pounds? Why not just stay there at 126?
I mean, he's been there a while now.
Why the move downstairs? Why now? It's not like 126 has nothing to offer. There's plenty of fights with plenty of fighters to go around. At 126, at featherweight, you have Josh Warrington, IBF champion. You have Kansu, WBA regular champion. I would say you have Gary Russell Jr., but Gary Russell Jr. is a permanent resident of PBC Island, so he's not in the running for a fight with anyone that isn't a PBC fighter. So he's not in the running. He's out. Though you do have the newly crowned WBO featherweight champion, Emmanuel Navarrete, who's coming off that win over Ruben Villa. I look at the state of 126 and I cross-compare the state of that division with the state of 122, and I ask myself, which division actually yields more opportunities? Because at 122 pounds, the WBO title is spoken for, and it's spoken for by a PBC fighter. Angelo Leo is the WBO champion at 122 pounds.
PBC guy.
Ray Vargas, yet another PBC fighter. He's the WBC champion at 122 pounds. The other two alphabet titles, the WBA and the IBF, both those titles are held by MJ Akhmadaliev, a matchroom guy, essentially. And any one of those fights with any one of those fighters, any one of those champions, might not be as feasible for Mick as what 126 pounds has to offer. Yet, he's moving down in weight. He's going to be having this Isaac Dogboe fight, which I think is a good fight. I think it's a good step up for him.
It is.
But if he makes it through that, beyond that fight, does he stay at 122? And if he does, for what?
And why didn't he just fight Isaac at 126?
The last time that both Mick and Isaac were in action, it was at 126. It was the featherweight limit. Why are you moving down now? Who really knows? In any event, it's an intriguing matchup. There's going to be a size differential here, the same way there was a size differential between Isaac Dogboe and Emmanuel Navarrete, though one could argue that Mick isn't the puncher that Emmanuel is. That makes for a very intriguing night.
An intriguing fight.
Isaac, being the smaller fighter in the fight, doesn't have much of a choice here. He's got to get on that front foot, and he has to be the aggressor, as he can't afford to box from the outside. He's a sitting duck out there. If he has any chance of winning this thing, it's by staying close to and staying with Mick Conlan, who might be the more statuesque fighter in the fight, but not the more experienced fighter in the fight. It is a risky fight, a risky situation for both guys. Does getting on the front foot and being the aggressor guarantee success for Isaac? Didn't work out that way when he fought Emmanuel Navarrete, though I reiterate, Mick isn't the puncher that Emmanuel is, so perhaps might actually work this time for Isaac. Who really knows? It's a great fight. I think it's a great addition to Tyson Fury's next fight.
His card.
And you know what? I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I'm really looking forward to this thing. And just in keeping with things going on at the lighter weights, Inquirer Sports tweeted, despite having only little to prove, Filipino boxing star Nonito Donaire is still eyeing more accolades to add to his surefire Hall of Fame career. And I have no doubts they're referencing his upcoming Ubali fight for the WBC title in the bantamweight division at 118 pounds later on this fall. To that, former super bantamweight champion, Guillermo Rigondeaux had this to say. He said, don't forget, all roads from 115 to 122 still lead to Rigondeaux. Current champion at 118, lineal champion at 122. I'll take the belts at 115 pounds and meet you there, too. Essentially, what Rigo is proposing is a rematch with Nonito Donaire. That is a possibility, and I've talked about this in the past. The case of Guillermo Rigondeaux is a very curious case, because you wonder, what does this guy actually have left? You know, he only suffered one loss his entire career. That loss was the loss to Vasyl Lomachenko at a weight that I told you guys
wasn't for him.
Rigondeaux simply didn't belong. He ain't got no business at 130 pounds.
It's too little.
I think a lot of people put a battery in Rigo's back. He certainly had a lot of supporters leading up to the fight, though afterwards, all those guys just evaporated. They just disappeared. Rigo subsequently took the whole of 2018 off. He didn't have a single fight that whole year. He made a return in 2019, inked a pact with the PBC. That's what side of the street he's on. And he had a very curious performance against Julio Ceja, as the otherwise defensively sound, the otherwise defensive wizard, Guillermo Rigondeaux, opted to bang in the booth with Julio Ceja.
For what?
Myself, I interpreted that as age catching up to Rigo, that he simply doesn't have his legs under him the way that he used to. Those fast twitch muscles that allowed for some of the best in and out game. At 122 pounds, they have since dulled and are not what they used to be. A very curious, albeit successful, performance against Julio Ceja. Then we saw quite the opposite from Rigo in the Liborio Solis fight, where he opted to bang in the booth with Julio Ceja. He spent a lot of time way out there on the outside of Liborio Solis.
That wasn't a phone booth fight.
And as far as I was concerned, that performance accented the exact same thing that the Julio Ceja performance accented. That Rigo doesn't have his legs under him the way that he used to, and his in and out game isn't what it used to be. That it has been ravaged by time. In the Ceja fight, he spent too much time on the inside. In the Liborio Solis fight, he spent way too much time on the outside, and that's because his in and out game, his sharpness, his reflexes,
his legs,
they just ain't what they used to be. And at the age of 40, what do you expect? I mean, I'm not taking shots at the guy. This is just an observation that the Rigo that box circles around Amagasa and Donaire is not the Rigo that stands before us here today. His in and out game has been lost to the ravages of time, thus making him still lingering around the sport at this age, at these weights, a very curious case. Because the guy's only got one loss on his record.
Just one.
And this guy throughout his career was known as a defensive wizard. Thus, he might actually be a little bit more well-preserved than some other fighters, though not well-preserved enough to be the same fighter that he used to be. I question what will become of Guillermo Rigondeaux if he is so confronted with certain situations while he lingers in the sport of boxing. What if he actually gets a rematch with Nonito Donaire 7 years after the first fight? 7 years. The first fight, that was way back there in 2013. It's 2020. Can Rigo still beat Nonito Donaire?
Can he?
Can he do to Donaire in 2020 what he did to him in 2013? Because if the Nonito Donaire that fought Naoya Inoue in the last leg of the World Boxing Super Series at this weight, if that guy shows up, I'm telling you, I don't like Rigo's chances. Just think about what has to happen in order for a Guillermo Rigondeaux-Nonito Donaire rematch to take place. For this to happen, Nonito Donaire would have to make his way past the unbeaten WBC champion, Nordine Oubaali. He will have unseated world champion, an unbeaten world champion, moves on from that to take on a very aged Guillermo Rigondeaux, who doesn't have the in-and-out game that he used to have. He's not the same defensive wizard that he used to be.
I think he better be careful what he wishes for.
Because his second fight with Nonito Donaire is a legitimate possibility. Lest we forget, Nonito's very next fight is taking place on a PBC-affiliated network, Showtime, and it just so happens that today, Guillermo Rigondeaux is a PBC fighter. If Nonito beats Nordin and becomes the WBC champion, maybe he takes that title, sees about trying to get a second fight with Naoya Inoue, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he stays right there on the PBC side of things long enough to get a Guillermo Rigondeaux rematch. After all, it's Nonito Donaire that would have a loss to avenge.
That's true.
Even though it's Rigo that's proposing a rematch. And it is entirely possible. It could happen, though if it does, I question as to whether or not Guillermo Rigondeaux can do in a second fight what he did in the first. Do you see Rigo calling himself a world champion? A world champion at 118 pounds, when in reality, Rigo's not a world champion. He is in possession of a baby belt, like many PBC fighters.
Yeah.
Ugas has got one.
Yeah.
Figueroa's got one. Rolly Romero, Gervonta Davis, they've got theirs. John Pascal, he's got his.
These are not world champions.
For Christ's sakes, we just talked about this in my last video, how this proliferation of quote-unquote world titles effectively dilutes the sport and misrepresents some of the combatants, because Guillermo Rigondeaux is not a champion, not in the full-fledged champion sense. He didn't get that WBA title from fighting Naoya Inoue, the full-fledged champion at this weight. He got a vacant version of Inoue's title by fighting Liborio Solis, who in no way, shape, or form represents one of the best and brightest fighters at 118 pounds. And beating that guy doesn't tell us that you're on the level. Since having lost that fight to Vasyl Lomachenko at 130 pounds, where Guillermo clearly didn't belong, he lost all of 2018. He didn't make a ring appearance at all that year. He made 2 ring appearances in 2019 and 1 earlier this year in 2020, though he has lost most of 2020, as he hasn't made a ring appearance since, and to my knowledge, isn't about to. Can a fighter Guillermo Rigondeaux's age, 40, afford to lose that much time, afford to spend that much time away from the ring? That's what makes Guillermo Rigondeaux's case such a curious case. I don't know if all this time off is helping him or hurting him. Is it helping to preserve him, or is he just accumulating ring rust, as
he's old?
He's pretty rusty already. I don't know. You better be careful what he wishes for, though, because he just might get that Nonito Donaire rematch.